Good evening, everybody. I am Lynn Leatherwood, and I am the president of Story Circle Network, and I am extremely happy that you're here tonight to join Grace Salmon and Mary Helen Sheriff, who are going to talk to us about changing your life one podcast at a time, and specifically increasing your author platform through the use of podcast. Welcome to Grace and Mary Helen. Very delighted you're here.
Thanks for having us.
Very good. And I, along with everyone else, I am eager to hear everything you have to share. So I will mute myself and let you get rolling right now. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having us. We're super excited to be here with Story Circle Network tonight. Our webinar is titled Changing Your Life One Podcast at a Time, which is really about how to use podcasts to increase your author platform. And I think that if you're sitting there and you aren't an author yet and you're writing, but you haven't quite published yet, I still think this is completely relevant because there are things you could be doing now to help when your book does come out, make that your dream a reality even quicker. You know, there's foundations you could go ahead and set and things you could start thinking about that would really help you along the way. So wherever you are in your journey, we welcome you and thank you for coming tonight.
Thanks, Mary. I'd like to welcome everybody as well. Just in the chat, if you would like to tell us a little bit about who you are, if you already have a podcast, if you're thinking about a podcast, just go ahead and put all of those things in the chat, because Mary and I will work through those as we move along throughout today. We'll talk about wanting to be on a podcast, having a podcast, and all of that. So go ahead and tell us about yourselves in the chat and begin to ask questions if you like. We'll have two different parts for questions and answers as well. So welcome. I'm Grace Salmon, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I'm the author of 4 books. My first 3 are in the area of education. My last book is a novel. It's called The Eves. And what I never thought would happen for me, first of all, I'm an older author in terms of being a novelist, and never, ever, ever did I ever think that I would have a podcast, let alone 2. And we'll be talking about those things as we move forward. I'm an educator, I'm an entrepreneur, I've started multiple businesses, but the message that I think Mary and I will both share with you is that we're never done. You never know where your book or your podcast life can teach you to go.
Hey, Grace, I want to put you on the spot for a second.
Yep.
Can you tell them a little bit about The Eves and how it relates to your podcast, The Storytellers? Because there's an interweaving there of those 2 platforms that I think nestles quite nicely.
Absolutely. So The Eves is the story of the psychologically complex Jessica Barnett. She has lost her way in the world. She has given up on almost everything except for her lies and her vodka. And she's pretty sure she's done until she meets this group of older women who are decidedly not done. They're diverse, they're ditzy, but they are determined to leave their mark on the world. I did, as many authors do, a series of podcasts after the book launched. And one podcast was on a show called Spunky Old Broads. And the woman who interviewed me called me back the next day and said, I absolutely loved your show together. You need to have your own radio show. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm done. And she said, obviously, you have not met the characters in your book. They're not done. You're not done. I think you should have your own radio show. And I just thought I'd take that leap. So
right.
So that one changed, and we've got the Storytellers, and later on we'll be talking to you about the next round.
And one thing I really liked about The Eves was there are a lot of characters. It's a whole, big crew of people, and each of them has a story. And part of the book is them telling their stories. So that idea of storytelling sort of carries through from your podcast to your book and kind of builds nicely on one another.
Well, it certainly helps with the brand, and we're going to be talking about that. And I really appreciate the people who are noticing and putting things in the chat. We've got people who have books already out, people who are thinking about a podcast, a series of questions. We've got Michelle from Cairo, Egypt, one of the places definitely on my wish list. So we've got good batch of questions and comments to start, Mary. Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Mary Helen Sheriff, and I started this journey as an author, and my book is Boop and Eve's Road Trip, and that has led me on some interesting journeys as far as marketing and things like that. And after the book came out, I realized I learned a lot about marketing through this experience. I was a former teacher, and I like to say that teaching didn't really prepare me for marketing a book, except trying to get middle schoolers to do what I want is maybe its own kind of marketing, but a different kind. Anyway, so the book came out, I learned a lot about marketing, and as that journey kept going, I found a lot of author friends who were turning to me with questions, and I found myself offering a lot of suggestions. And then one of them, or a few of them, actually sort of pushed me into saying, hey, Mary, maybe you should start a little side business and help people learn to market their books. Because most of us writers are creative types and we have a lot of great ideas for marketing, but how to put all those ideas together can be overwhelming. And it can be distracting and time consuming and expensive. And so having someone to kind of guide you and hold your hand and tell you what's worth it and what's not would be really, helpful to a lot of authors. And so about, I guess, a little over 6 months ago or so, I decided to launch this author marketing coach business, and Grace and I partner on a lot of different projects together through that. And one of the things I offer is a blog that's free. It's called Journey into Book Marketing. And that's through bookishroadtrip.com. So if you ever want to go there and get some tips, there's some great blog entries, I think so anyway, that you might enjoy. I also have started a podcast through them, which is called Growing Up Bookish. And it kind of has a different slant to it. It plays into my role as a former teacher and my love of children's books. I actually have an MFA in children's literature. And the book that I'm working on currently is a young adult novel. So that's where I see the future of my writing career going. And so I'm preempting that publication that I expect to happen in the future through starting this podcast that's for people who are interested in raising readers, and it focuses on children's literature. So it's providing me an opportunity to meet other children's book authors and other influencers in that space before the book actually even exists. So hopefully by the time the book exists, I've already got kind of a network of people who I have met and been working with. And so that's the kind of thing we're going to be encouraging you all to do as this evening goes through, is think about where you want to go and what kind of podcasts can help you make those goals. Okay, Grace?
Absolutely.
Oh no, it's still me. I'm still talking. Okay.
Or whatever. Go, Mary, go.
Okay, our plan for our hour together, or however long it ends up being, is we're going to start getting you thinking about what your goals and your ideas are, and then what sort of podcasts might work for you. We're going to talk about guesting on podcasts and looking at your target audience, and then trying to find podcasts that mesh with your target audience. We'll give you some tips for getting started, both in guesting and in hosting your own. And talk a little bit about what you would need to do if you were going to host your own show, and what resources, give you some resources to help you get started if that's something you decide you want to pursue. We're going to have 2 Q&As. So kind of think of this as 2 parts. Part 1 is being a guest, and part 2 is hosting your own. And so in between, we'll have a Q&A, and then we'll have one at the end as well. If you want to post questions at any point, we will might address them in real time if it really fits in nicely with whatever we're talking about, or we'll definitely get to them in the Q&A section as well.
And we've got some great questions coming in, Mary, that I think our outline has already made some good matches for it. And someone did ask, how long are we going to go? We're going to go about an hour and 15. If there's lots of questions, we can stay for an hour and a half. So thanks for being with us, no matter how long you're with us. When we ask you here, why are you interested in this particular webinar? We already have some ideas of that from the chat. Some of you have memoirs that you'd like to be on people's podcasts, but I'd really urge you, and this is something that I am not. Mary is far more strategic. She's already spoken to you about, she has a young adult book coming out. So she started a podcast for people who are interested in that age group. I'm much more, and I say this to Mary all the time, I'm much more of a spaghetti against the wall kind of girl, but I'm going to urge you to be as strategic as possible. What is it that you really want to achieve? Whether it's on you talking about your book, is it to sell more books? Is it to build an author network like Mary talked about? You don't need to know the answers to that, but it's really helpful if you can begin to think, what is my ultimate goal? Because that's going to tie in towards the end of our podcast when we talk about what does success mean. And the truth is, you're not going to know everything that you want, but if it's about getting your book out, your focus is going to be much more singular. If it's going to be about helping people with addiction or overcoming grief, which is some of the comments that we're seeing, you're going to have to look for different kinds of podcasts. There's one here, there's a question about parenting. So there are niches for every single one of these type of podcasts. Mary, let's go to the next slide. So we just talked briefly about zero in on your target audience. Mary alluded to it, I just did it. So it's that target audience tied to your goals. What do you know about your target audience? Who's reading your book? These are all really important questions. Who do you engage with? And I would say here, it's well beyond just the idea of a podcast. What is your social media life like? I will tell you, my social media life 2 years ago was nil, and I liked that a lot. Mary dragged me kicking and screaming. We both are part of Bookish Road Trip, where again, it's a great platform for authors to network, but there are also podcasting platforms. There's a platform that I'm part of called She Podcasts. I'm not very active there, but who do you engage with is going to be a big part of how you're going to get your message out, whether it's with fellow authors or whether it's with podcasters. But it's really important to figure out where you're going to be a good guest and who's buying your book. An entree into that is something about data. There is so much data out there. We're not going to read you all of these stats, but I will tell you, you know, this is being recorded and you'll be able to see these again. But this is a great example of who's listening to podcasts. First of all, it's the greatest, fastest growing communication tool across all media. So that's wonderful if you're thinking of either being on a podcast or hosting your own. But let's look at just a couple of these highlights. Women do not listen as much as men. They certainly listen, that's a good percentage, but they don't listen. Teenagers aren't as big as listeners. If you look at how we break out ethnically, it's very different as well. So all of these metrics are things that you're going to want to think about when you begin to say, where do I want to be on a podcast? Where can I position myself? So you can see, I just mentioned Facebook earlier, 68% of people who listen to podcasts are Facebook users. So we're also talking about an age demographic, right? If you're almost exclusively on TikTok or on Instagram, it's going to be a different platform, although the 68 to 64 isn't that big a difference. But look at how it drops off after TikTok. It might be attention spans, it could be many things, but knowing who is listening and watching and doing this work will be important to you. Michelle, I'm going to just pop in for just a second. Michelle has a question. Is it a strong social media presence necessary? I'm a dinosaur and I don't really participate. Yeah, I want to tell you it's not important, but it is. But it's not critical, but and I'm happy to chat with anybody about doing this idea of how do you even get comfortable in social media. I'm spending less and less time as opposed to more and more time, because when I started, Michelle, it was disastrously too much time.
So the other thing to think about with that question, Grace, is also like social media is sort of like the low-hanging fruit. It is an easy way to get in front of a lot of people. There are other ways to get in front of a lot of people, but they aren't as easy and they aren't as inexpensive. So do you have to do social media? No. Will it actually make your life easier to be successful selling your book or selling your podcast? Yes. Could you pay for ads and not be on social media? Yes, you could. That's going to cost you money, right? I mean, maybe not expensive, but yes, there are definitely ways to do it without social media, but you're making it harder or more expensive.
Absolutely. It is absolutely the best networking platform. And we'll talk a little bit about how to build those networks through social media. But again, not critical, but making your life easier. We're going to go through a 5-step guide on how to be a great guest. And anybody who leaves their email in the chat, Mary and I wrote an article recently on changing your life one podcast at a time. It talks about all of the things that we're going to be talking about in depth. I am happy to send anybody that article. So, if you leave your email in the chat, there goes Len. We'd be happy to send that article to you, Len. So we're going to first target on getting the gig, because obviously you can't become a guest if you don't have the gig first. We'll talk about how to sharpen your skills, how to get going, how to be a great guest, and how to max the experience out. And I love seeing that we got many emails coming in the chat. So Mary, take us away to getting the gig.
Getting the gig. Okay, so I would suggest that you are really strategic about the podcasts that you want to be on. You want to look for, you can do Google searches. I really recommend finding authors that are already established in your genre. A lot of them will have a list of podcasts that they've been on. So you would kind of be able to listen to that episode and see if that podcast sounds like a good fit for you. And then when you approach the people, you can say, oh, hey, I listened to this podcast interview you did with so-and-so. It was fantastic. I loved this about it. But since you liked their book, blah, 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 you would probably also like my book. I would love to be on your podcast. Any interest in having me on as a guest? And that kind of approach is more likely to get you a yes. Or sometimes it's a not now, I'm booked, but maybe later. That's an okay answer too, because a lot of times people do these in cycles. But being really strategic about actually doing research on the podcast and knowing which ones would be a good fit for you, knowing which ones have a similar listenership to your readership, and then actually listening. I think that's really, really huge. I've had people pitch me to be on my podcast that don't write kids' books. Like, they don't even use the name of the podcast in their pitch. They clearly have no idea what the podcast is. And I mean, it's a waste of my time. And it's kind of, it's kind of insulting. And I don't mean that but I mean, I'm trying to help people, but to have people who want my help and didn't even listen to my podcast is not maybe the best approach to getting what you want. Plus, you're wasting your own time, right? You're wasting your own time pitching someone who's never going to say yes because your book doesn't fit. And there's some podcasts that interview people, and those are, kind of what you want. But there's some podcasts that are really just the host rambling for a half an hour or an hour, and maybe their topic aligns with yours. But if they don't ever interview anybody, then pitching them is also probably not your best bet. So, listening will kind of clue you into that sort of thing as well. Like, do these people actually have guests on their podcast? Is that this kind of podcast? Making connections with these people, maybe even your first connection to them isn't the pitch. Maybe the first connection to them is a compliment of an episode. Maybe you start a conversation. Maybe you compliment them and then ask them a question so that you could have a dialogue going with them that you then ease into a pitch with later after you're already best friends. You make a relationship with a person. You don't just ask for things for them. You write reviews for their podcast. You share their podcast on your social media platform. You show yourself as a friend and a supporter, and they're more likely to want to be a friend and supporter to you. That's how you get noticed. But ultimately, you do have to ask. Yeah, sometimes they might approach you and ask you. That can certainly happen, but you shouldn't count on that. And I sometimes talk to authors who've done all these wonderful things for someone under the assumption that they're going to return the favor, but they never actually ask for the favor. And then their feelings are hurt that this magical invitation never came. And the person doesn't even know that they were angling for that. So if the magical invitation isn't coming, it's okay at some point to just say, oh, hey, I would love to be on your podcast sometime. Do you think, we could set something up? That's an appropriate question to ask. So thinking through those things and being, having a strategy, connecting, sharing, supporting them, and then making the ask. Sharpening your skills. So before you go on a podcast, you want to be a good guest on a podcast. What do you need to do to be a good guest? Well, you probably want to practice speaking some. One of the things you'll probably be asked to do is pitch your book. You want to have a really short, concise pitch for your book. 1 minute, 2 minutes, maybe 3 tops. But you want to be able to talk about what your book's about quickly and interestingly. And you want to have that practiced. There are also questions that almost everyone asks you. What inspired you to write this book? What was a challenge you faced in this book? That kind of thing. Go ahead and have answers prepared for those sorts of things because you're going to get asked it over and over and over again. You don't have to memorize your answer word for word, but you can. But the more you practice doing that sort of thing, the better you'll get at it. Another thing you can even do, which I've done a few times, is record yourself on Zoom answering those sorts of questions and then watch it back. And I'll tell you what, the act of watching it back can be kind of painful. You'll find that you have little quirks in your public speaking that you didn't realize. And I still work through some of those. Apparently, I kind of smack my lips sometimes when I'm thinking, instead of saying, I'll go. Anyway, if you see me doing that, sorry, I've been working on it and I'm getting a lot better, but you start to notice things that you never even knew you did. Or, sometimes I'll wave my hands around a lot and I've been working on it. But being more self-aware of those kinds of things helps you to not do them as much or not be distracting with them. No one expects you to be perfect, but you can get better. And that's what we're going to all try to do. So knowing your stuff, again, you're going to know the format of this podcast because you've listened to it. You're going to know if there's a certain standard question they always ask on that podcast. So you're not going to be thrown at the end when they have 10 questions they ask you in 30 seconds because you already know they're going to do that. That kind of thing can really be helpful. Having a toolkit prepared, they're going to ask you for a headshot. They're going to ask you for a bio. You should just have that stuff really easy for you to get to and be able to send right away. And they're going to ask you for a cover image. So, there's just a little package of things that you can just have on the ready so that when they ask you for these things, you have them and you're set to go. I think Grace is going to talk in a minute about some equipment you can have that would make your podcast better. And I'll leave that to her to do.
So when you're looking at beginning, it's really all about planning. When you are thinking about getting the gig, you've already asked somebody, can I be on your show? They're going to ask for those things that Mary just said. Can I have your headshot? Can I have your bio? I don't mean that you have to be able to sit there at your computer just waiting for that, oh, I hope they're going to ask me. But if they say, I really need your headshot or bio, please don't ask them to ask twice, because all of us who are doing podcasts are so busy, and it's not our real job in many cases. So, for example, I'm lucky enough on my 2 shows to be booked out through June in both shows. But I already have everybody's headshot lined up. I've got their bios. If I get to April and I'm getting ready to do some of the promoing and I have to say, wait a minute, I don't have Mary Helen's headshot, it's not the end of the world, but they're going to just feel better about you. So deliver your materials easily and quickly. So having that toolkit that Mary talked about. She also talked about listening to your host's show. That's important, not only for the reasons that Mary talked about, but when they say to you, when you go back with the questions like says, is this an audio or video? It's clear you never listen to their show if you don't know how that is already set up. So there are a couple of things about listening to the show that is important so that you're prepared, but also so that that helps you get the gig because you've watched 1 or 2 episodes. The things about sound and lighting are a mystery. Everybody told me right away, the first thing I needed to do was get a ring light. If you don't know what a ring light is a light that's shaped in a ring. I bought one. So it's like this, but it's a light. I will tell you, if you wear glasses, please do not get a ring light. It makes you, I can't tell you how many podcasts I've been on where I look demonic with these circles here. So don't have somebody said, well, you're definitely going to need a ring light. If you don't wear glasses, it's great. It gives you beautiful diffuse light, but you're going to want to be in a place, no matter where you're going to be, it should be quiet. Some people build sound studios in their closets. Mary Helen Sheriff and I work with somebody who literally has a 3x5 closet, which she has put up sound materials. I work my podcast in this beautiful studio, which, believe it or not, is just the 3rd bedroom in my house. But it's this room because it's carpeted, it's got a big bed, it's got heavy drapes. When I walk into this room, the sound deadens. The lighting is important. My lighting during the day, I like to have natural light. But again, that can cause really big shadows. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. More important in the beginning, I'm going to say, oh, and we can talk microphones. You can buy $1,000 microphones. I will tell you some of my best recordings are just on my iPad where I get good picture quality and good sound. If you're doing lots of this, yes, you're going to want to always wear headphones. That's a no-brainer. You have to wear headphones because it will take away the echoes that you get. But don't worry about your sound so much in the beginning. What I would like to tell you to do is branding. Mary Helen Sheriff and I work with a woman named Julie Valerie, who has taught me at least more about branding. In my book, The Eves, it's very much about leaving your mark on the world. And there's 2 scenes in the book where the characters dip their hands in paint and leave their hands on the wall of a barn. Well, I was lucky that my beta readers did that exact same thing for me. They dipped their hands in paint. They wrote a quote from the book, and it instantly, I knew it was going to be my brand, because what I want to be my brand, whether it's in my writing or either of my podcasts, it's how are we leaving our mark in the world? So you will never see me without my hands, even if it's just a subliminal image. Now, sometimes I put up a poster of my book, but the hands are still going to be showing. So think about, and we should, both Mary and I have posters of our books that we put up behind us to enhance that image. Who am I talking to? I'm talking to the woman who wrote that book. There's her thing. And also get to the studio early. I'm compulsively early, so nobody gets there as early as me. But I hate being in the studio at 1 o'clock for a 1 o'clock show when I've asked people to get there at least 10 minutes early to do a sound check. So just monitor your time. If you only have a certain amount of time, please build in that getting to the studio early part. In our next slide, we're going to talk about how you should be a really great guest, because this is all about you. This should be all about you enjoying talking about your book, talking about your special project, because some of you I see in the comments, you don't have a book out yet, or you may not even have a book, but you want to enjoy this moment where you've been asked to contribute, whether it's about a special project or whether it's about your work. So know that this is absolutely your moment to shine. But before you do that, absolutely also remember, it's really not about you. It's about a podcaster who wants a growing audience, who wants to engage with certain people. So you have to be very respectful of that. And one of the ways to do that is to be able to say, you know, Mary, I listened to you when you interviewed those 2 young girls on your Growing Up Bookish podcast. That reinforces for her listeners that, oh, she does a lot of different people. It helps boost her image, but it also makes for a more engaging conversation. And that's going to be an important part. So be prepared with those types of things when you go on a podcast, but also be prepared for your key messages. It's easy for a podcaster to get derailed. They might want to say, oh, Mary, they just want to talk about your Growing Up Bookish podcast. Really, Mary's there because she wants to pump Boop and Eve's road trip. It just won an award. And you as the guest have to be prepared. Just like I say this all the time, it's like high school debate class. You know, if they say to you, so tell us about your podcast, your answer is, you know, it came about because I wrote this book called The Eves. It's getting back to your key message. It's debate school all the time. So remember what your key message is, but remember too that you're more than just books, and people do buy books, but they buy books because they've fallen in love with that author. If you write, as I did, you know, I wrote The Eves because I was at a position where my mom had died, my father was very old, my adult children were out of the house, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my next chapter. I wasn't quite as mess as my character Jessica is in The Eves, but make sure that you get that key message across. And one last thing, it's okay if you have notes. I have notes today to make sure I say the things that I want to say. But also, I have a character in my book, The Eves, just modeling behavior for you. But I have a character in that book, and her name is Mary Margaret. I can never remember whether it's Margaret Mary or Mary Margaret. I have a note right stuck to my computer that says, it's Mary Margaret Grace. So don't be afraid to surround yourself unobtrusively with notes. Mary.
Two things I want to say on top of what Grace says. Grace is actually super fantastic of bringing the conversation back to key messages. I have watched her do that many, many times and been jealous at her skill at doing that. So I did want to give that as a compliment. Sometimes what I do if I'm going on a podcast and I really do have something in particular I want to make sure I hammer, I'll just put the key message on a Post-it note and put that on my monitor. So it's just kind of a reminder, oh my gosh, what are we talking about? We're talking about going drinking at some bar. Wait a minute, this is fun, but how do I, get back to that? And don't not talk about going to a bar. That's, that's fun stuff too. But so that's one thing. The other thing is I'm modeling currently the non-branding background. I do usually have my book cover behind me and my logo for my author marketing coach business. I'm not living in my house this week. I'm at my mom's house. So you have the makeshift studio, which, it can work. This is working just fine, but just I'm the don't and Grace is the do. Okay. Anyway, so maxing out. Is that what we're on? Yes? Yes. Okay. So this is afterward, right? Like, what do? You've done this fantastic work on this podcast. What do you do now to actually make it forward, make it more? So obviously you say thank you to the person who just brought you on their podcast and shared their whole platform with you, which is a very gracious thing, much like a host in a home guesting you, like my parents are this week. You ask for referrals. You say, hey, this was so much fun. I really love being on your podcast. Do you have any podcaster friends you think might be a good fit for me and my book? I would love any of your suggestions if you have any. And sometimes some of them will send you somewhere. You can ask the host, hey, are you looking for people to be on your podcast? I have, some author friends who I bet would, be fantastic on your show. Again, some podcasters are looking for people. Some of them aren't. But if you ask, you've done them a favor just by asking, hey, I've thought about you. And it might be a way to help out some of your friends too. So it's, it could be win-win-win all the way around. Your podcaster gets something out of it, you get something out of it, and your author friends get something out of it. You should absolutely 100% post the episodes you were on your social media and on your website. That is just a courtesy to help them build their platform. But also, I'm always surprised by people who I know have already listened to me in a million interviews and have already read my book, who will be like, oh, I want to go listen to the episode you did on that podcast. And I'm kind of like, aren't you sick of me yet? But surprisingly, there's always a handful of people who go and will follow you and listen to you other places too. So don't think that people are tired of that. And if they are, then they just won't go, right? Like, you're not overselling yourself by sharing this fantastic podcast that you were just on and this episode that they could catch. And if they don't want to catch your episode, they can watch another one. You should use the links of the podcast to promote yourself to other podcasts. So, hey, look, I would love to be on your podcast. You've done all the sucking up you were going to do prior to the pitch. Hey, I've been on a bunch of other podcasts. I was on this one and this one if you want to listen, because a podcaster wants to know that you have something to say, that you're somewhat articulate. The last thing a podcaster wants is a dud on their show, right? They've got to, they have to keep their listeners engaged and coming back for more. So being able to like check you out ahead of time before they book you and know that you can do those things and that you'll add value to their platform is really helpful. It helps your social clout. Tell your followers to subscribe to their show on YouTube, write reviews, write comments. Don't just drop the host after you've been on their show. Circle back occasionally, check in with them, whether that's an email, whether that's a comment on social media, whether, however you choose to do that. Don't disappear. You're trying to build a career and you need the relationship to be ongoing. Sometimes I will lose threads of that. Like there's enough people I'm trying to keep up with that I kind of like lose track. And so I'll occasionally sit down and make a chart. Okay, this month, my goal is to make sure that I connect with these 20 people, and I'll go out of my way to do that, because otherwise, just in my mind, I get caught up in the big stuff. And sometimes I lose threads of those relationships. And I know that's a weakness of mine. So that's a way I try to manage that weakness of mine, of trying to like maintain that relationship. And, reflect on the podcast afterward, reflect on what you did well, what you could have done better, what you might do next time. And so that, again, you're just always getting better and improving, because this is quite a journey we're on. And we can leverage this so many different ways, but the better we are at it, the more we can make out of it.
When we think about where does this get us, this is really the surprising part. I think the reason we're on podcasts is because we love talking about our work. And that's really our overarching goal. But what is a surprise to us is where all of these things lead us. When Mary wrote her book and I wrote my book, neither one of us anticipated that we would be part of a Facebook group. I will tell you, it's probably one of the fastest growing reader author Facebook groups. It's called Bookish Road Trip. We've gone in a year and a half to 2 years now, 4,000 members with very, very high participation rates. So Mary started that along with several other authors. I hopped on about a year and 3 months ago, but that's really all I thought I would be doing. Now, I've already mentioned I have the 2 radio shows. The one radio show is called Storytellers, which we've talked about. Then Mary and I were talking about how do we begin to leverage everything we've learned to help other authors. Mary has started an amazing business called Author Marketing Coach, where she works closely with authors on developing strategic plans, et cetera. And she'll be talking a bit about that in a minute. But I thought I knew nothing. So for those of you out there who are, Luddites with technology, that was me in terms of social media. So I didn't realize that there were things like a TBR, a to be read list, a WIP, a work in progress. And there's a litany of things that I didn't know about, partly because of my age, partly because my first 3 books were not novels. So I had this idea that why don't we begin to help authors who are launching books? We certainly know lots of them through Bookish Road Trip, and we know lots of them through other forums that we are engaged in. So I went to Mary and I said, why don't we start yet a new podcast called Launchpad? And we'll call it the unique experience for people who are launching their books, both as a radio show and as a marketing experience. And we thought about that in March of this year. We had our first show in August. We are booked through June. It's a very unique format. It's 4 authors at a time. We love it when friends come on together because it's just great synergy. But in the middle of that, Mary and I were talking and we said, well, we have this series. Why don't we write some books around the series? So now we've got 3 books coming out in the spring called Launchpad, the Countdown to Writing Your Book, Launchpad, the Countdown to Marketing Your Book, and Launchpad, the Countdown to Publishing Your Book, not in that order. We're also part of something called Author Talk Network. So we have created all of these things or been invited to participate through others. The things that you can do on your own or being parts of book clubs, which is just such a great way to market your book. And I just learned of a website, I'm not going to remember it, but I bet if you typed in find a book club, you can actually type in your zip code and get names of registered book clubs in your area. Getting involved in various social media platforms is great, but the library programs, senior citizens programs, Kiwanis, there are such a list of places where you can be asked to speak, to be other guests, to create new networks. And keep in mind, Mary said something, you're trying to build a career out of this. And it's not necessarily that it's going to be your lifelong career, for example, if you're my age, but you're going to have other books behind you and you're not even going to know it. All of this podcasting world, as strategic as Mary is and as spaghetti as I am, I don't think either one of us could have figured out where we were going to be today. Right, Mary?
Absolutely not. I never thought I'd be here right now with you. I didn't even know you when this book came out. And I think
now we spend a lot of time together.
We do. I think that the other thing to think about with podcasts, sometimes it feels like in some platforms you get to a certain circle of people and they start to overlap and you sort of start to see the same people at a lot of different things. I think podcasts are a little different than that. I think it kind of helps you break out of some of those overlapping circles so for people who've been doing this longer, and I've talked to sometimes authors who, are on their third or fourth book and they're like, yes, I've been doing all the things, but I feel like I'm not getting to new people anymore. I think podcasts are a nice avenue for getting out of these sort of little hives we build, little, that grow to a certain point and then stop.
And I want to make two more. Were you done, Mary?
Yeah, it's good.
I want to make two other points. I do a lot of writing. I'm frequently asked to do a blog post. I'm frequently asked to contribute. And I'm at the point now where if somebody says, Grace, go in and write 3,000 words on ring lights, pros and cons, I can do that in a second. And it's always an honor. Mary and I are both part of a program right now, 25 hottest media influencers, and we're conducting interviews and we're writing articles. So we're both writing, we're both very connected into the community. It's great fun, but this is where I always like to say, danger, 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 Will Robinson. Because, and if you're, Mary, do you even know that reference?
No idea.
I love it. I love it. So it's from an old black and white television show, Mary, where the robot is reminding the kid, danger, danger. But here's the danger. I have not written another novel. My book is out. It'll be 2.5 years. I love my author life. But there is a part of my soul that has said, you need a book out every 18 months and you haven't done anything more than write the beginning and the end. So the danger part is there. It's getting back to your goals. It's being more strategic. And I really want you to think about that. Mary, somebody's asking how you and I first connected. Let's talk about sucking up.
Yeah. So we've been telling you guys to suck up, and Grace is, I swear, the mastermind behind this. But I was running Bookish Road Trip with 3 other author friends, and we all of a sudden noticed this woman, Grace Salmon, who just kept commenting like on everything. And we were like, gosh, who is this woman? So we're like, go look her up and find out about her book and find out who she is. And we're like, oh, she seems pretty nice. And then, a month or 2 down the road, we're like, we need some more help over here. Anybody have any ideas about who we should ask? And someone was like, I don't remember who it was, but one of us was like, yeah, that lady Grace seems like really into Bookish Road Trip. I bet she'd help. There you go. Next thing we know, I call up Grace and I'm like, we don't really know each other except through online. And I don't know if you'd have any interest in this, but we're growing and we'd love some help. And we notice how good you are with people. And one of the things we want is like a person in charge of membership. And we would love somebody who's kind of like a warm hostess. And you really seem to fit that image. And she was like, yeah, I'll do it. Well, lo and behold, then she later on admits to me that she did it all on purpose. Like like we were just doing exactly what she wanted us to do.
Somewhat strategic, not entirely strategic. But we met we have a network of women over there at Bookish Road Trip. And at the moment, there are 11 of us who help run that program. But that was a great example of doing what Mary talked about before. I heard Julie Valerie on a podcast with Annie McDonald, and I was blown over by how Julie talked about writing. I'm still always amazed at how Julie, it's just a joy. If you want, she could do 20 minutes on a comma, and you would think it was the best 20 minutes you've ever had. You may never want to hear anything more about commas again, but you're going to absolutely love this. Oh, look, somebody just bought a copy of the Eves. Yes. Mary, we have met our goal, Mary.
Good job.
Thank you for that, Gretchen. I appreciate it. But I very, very nervously emailed Julie, tracked her down, and I just said, I don't know if you'd ever have any time to talk to me about how I could be on social media because I don't know how to do it. And here's my phone number. My phone literally rang 20 minutes later and said, hi, it's Julie Valerie. I'm driving my kids' carpool. What do you need to know? So everybody is so accessible in this world. So this is the time where we ask for questions and answers.
What do we
Yes,
got?
Len knows about Danger, Will Robinson. Thank you.
I bet Liz doesn't.
Maybe not. Okay, questions and answers. Put your questions in the chat. Please feel free to do that. Len, thanks for helping us monitor those. Okay, no questions.
All right. We can just keep going and save them all for the end then.
Works for me.
All right.
Wait, how much time does this all take? Oh my.
Well, I mean, the question would be how much time you got. No, but seriously, I think it's the kind of thing where you would have to just say, here's how much time I have to spend on this. Because you could spend 80 hours a week on it, or you can spend 2 hours a week on it. How much time do you want to spend on it? And that's part of knowing what your goals are and knowing what you're trying to achieve and working to figure out how to make it all manageable and work into the life that you want to make the goals you want to make.
Thank you. And we actually are getting a couple of questions now. And just to piggyback on what Mary said, it also takes less time once you do it. I really love to prepare in detail for my storytellers. And I used to try to read at least half of the book of every single person I interviewed. I don't have that time anymore. So here's a great cheat. If you're ever interviewing other authors, you can go to Amazon and it has this little thing that says, look inside this book. And you can read like the first 25 pages. And while I'm the most authentic person you're going to know, I'm never going to say, gosh, Mary, I did read your entire book, which I did, and it's great. But I can at least say, so you have an interesting relationship between Boop and Eve. How did you think about that? Because I'm going to know the characters' names and things. So the longer you do podcasting and the longer you're on multiple podcasts, the better you'll get and the less time that it takes to prepare. You can just start Googling podcasters, but you could be much more strategic and say, Google podcasters on parenting, Google podcasters on grief. I interviewed a woman on the Storytellers the other day who's a lawyer who deals with kids who were sexually abused and taken away from their parents. So it can be incredibly narrow. Yeah, that would be a great place. But you could also, if you have an author that you're following, Mary had said, make sure you put everything up on your website. If you go to Mary's website, Mary Sheriff, is it Mary Sheriff or Mary Helen Sheriff?
Mary Helen Sheriff.
MaryHelenSheriff.com. And she'll have everything under mine, Grace Salmon, not spelled like the fish, but said like it, gracesalmon.net. I have every single podcast and blog I've ever been on. That's a great place to go troll. You can say, gosh, Grace did this thing with drinking with authors. That was fun, and just follow that and make lists that way. There's a question about microphones. Microphones is a tricky one. I'm eyeing one that hangs from the ceiling and doesn't vibrate. I love my earpods, my earbuds. Currently, I'm just using the best, but still fairly cheap from Best Buy. earphones are more important than microphones. If you get really fancy, you can, and we talk about this a little bit later as well. You can get microphones that will give you gauges, like don't talk this loud or don't talk that loud, and you get really nice sound. Yes, somebody else remembers it was called Lost in Space, and there's a newer show where danger, danger is still an iconic warning from the robot. Danger, danger, Will Robinson. My question is this: do podcasters sell books, or more importantly, create relationships with one's readers? Mary.
Yes. Yes. I think they definitely sell books. As far as building relationships, I mean, I think they can start a relationship. If you have your own podcast, I think you can build a relationship, but guesting on them could be the start of a relationship, particularly if you're smart and at the end of it, you tell people about your website and you mention that, oh, you have a newsletter there and they should sign up, and you tell them that you hang out in Bookish Road Trip or wherever it is you hang out. You know, you can build a relationship from there. And I do think having a podcast definitely can to build a community around that alone. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I can also say one more thing. I was on a radio show early in my book launch thing, and it happened to be one of those days where I had, well, I guess actually it wouldn't happen to me. At that time, I was psycho following my Amazon ranks and actually like writing them down every day to watch, like to see what triggered the rank to go up or down. Grace is laughing at me because she
Strategic.
Yeah, this wouldn't surprise Grace. But anyway, and I happen to know that being on this show made my rank go up like 400,000 points that day. And that's the only thing I did that day. So I'm, relatively certain. And, you can kind of see geographically where the books are sold. It was in the area, it went on their live, like a local radio station. And so I could see that the books are actually sold in this random state that's really far away from me. So I'm sure it was that radio show that did it.
And I would tell you, I never even look at my Amazon ranks. All I want is my royalty check to come in. I get paid monthly on all 3 of the platforms where I get paid. So all I care is that I still get a royalty check. And I will be very, very proud to tell you, I am an international bestseller because I had 86 cents in royalties last month from England, I think it was. There's a question, and this is a great one, Mary. I'm going to send it to you. What if you're an introvert and you really have a hard time sucking up our word or selling yourself and your book?
I think the people that I've talked to who struggle with that more than others really try to think of it as what you're going to do for them instead of what they're going to do for you. And think about how you can be a support to the bookish community and book influencers rather than what they can do for you. Even if you don't do the hard ask at the end, which I think you should work yourself up to, but even if you don't, putting goodwill out there and being supportive will come back and help lift you too.
And I think some of the things we talked about earlier will help that. If you get comfortable taping yourself on Zoom, or if you have a partner or a best friend who can fire questions at you, it does get easier and easier. Most people will tell you they hate the sound of their voice, but you'll get more comfortable with that. Mary talks about that all the time. I've been doing sound work for so long that I wouldn't say I have a fabulous voice, but I will tell you that's not a factor. So you're going to get more and more comfortable. But I would tell you, all authors, who knew I didn't plug in, Mary? As I worry about my battery running low, I'm just going to say, I'm going to toss this back to you, Mary, about social media channels and which one we use back and forth. Let's talk about Instagram.
Oh, so I do my Bookish Road Trip, my Growing Up Bookish on Instagram. I do it as a live show there. Pluses and minuses when you have a live show. Instagram pushes it out to the whole Instagram world and people are getting notices. Oh, Bookish Road Trip's gone live. And you end up getting random people coming on, and that works really well. And then it's still available to watch afterward. So afterward, I go into Facebook and I put links up and say, hey, did you catch this? Because if you didn't, it's still there, when I put it in newsletters and things like that. So it continues to have a long life even after it's live. So you kind of get the benefit of both. Instagram is not my favorite platform. I don't particularly like their live platform because I don't love the fact that I have to go on live and then my guest has to join me. And sometimes, they have technical difficulties and I'm left scrambling and acting like an idiot for 5 minutes while we try to figure it out and people wait patiently. I don't think I'm going to stay on Instagram forever, but for now, it's where I am and it serves its purpose. I think that if you want to make money off of your podcast, YouTube is probably the best bet. That doesn't mean it would be the only place you put it, but if you can get your subscriber rate high enough on YouTube, you can start to sell ads and things like that. And that's, I think, where a lot of podcasters actually end up making money.
We'll talk about all that kind of thing in our next segment as well, about return on investment and where we should post. We're at almost 8 o'clock. Do we want to switch on to the second section and people can continue with questions? Let's do it.
All right. So what do you want to host? Do you want to host your podcast, Grace? Tell me if I want to host one.
Well, there are pros and cons, and there's a return on investment. So here's the why you do it. First of all, there's an ego thing involved, right? People, if you're an author already, you know that people think authors are amazing. I'm going to give you a little side story today. A friend of mine was in a small town here in Florida, and they walked into this bookstore and my book was there. And they took a picture and they said, this is amazing. Here you are in the middle of the state. It's so fabulous. And I was like, yay, that's great. And then I realized they only took 2 of my books, which means that one of my books at least is still sitting there 8 months later. So, but there was that momentary ego thing of, look, this is a book right there in the middle of the state. So there is the ego thing, and there is nothing wrong with ego. Shy, not shy. There is nothing wrong about feeling great about the fact that you have toiled hard and contributed something to our community. So part of that is the idea of it makes you feel good, it gives you meaning, it gives you purpose. Part of it is getting your message across. My book, Mary's book, both have very strong messages. They're novels, but Mary's is all about intergenerational families and depression and finding a journey. And even though Mary's and I did not know, we have a lot of overlapping themes within our books. So what are the pros? You're going to get well known, you're going to get your message across, you're going to sell some books, you're going to develop a network, and you're going to develop a skill set that's going to serve you well for if you get invited to be at a library talk or even at a book club. The cons, it goes back to that singular focus. I haven't written another book and it's been 18 months. So the con is, what is your goal? What is your purpose? And it is the amount of time. It takes more time, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, than I would have thought, but it's getting less and less as I go on. The ROI, the return on investment, that's one of those terms I didn't, even though it's not a book term particularly, it wasn't a term I even thought about in terms of this. I just finished reading a chapter in a book in the last week about, do you get a return on your investment if you give a lot of your books away? How do you then sell books? Well, it depends on where you give it away. If you give one book away to the head of a book club who has 15 people in it, that's probably a good investment. If you give other books away, it may or may not be. If you're investing in a lot of equipment, it might take you some time to get it back. Almost all podcasters do not get paid for their services. There are some where you get sponsors. Mary and I work with an amazing podcaster, and she got a sponsor, which happens to be a liquor company in her town. It's a fabulous podcast. It's one of the best I've been on, called Drinking with Authors with Erica Lance. And quite honestly, and she would tell you this, she gets paid in alcohol. So there are lots of ways to get an ROI, but I would not think that that's something that you're going to see, but it's certainly something you should think about.
And then our return on investment wouldn't necessarily be financial, right? Your return could be in influence, your return could be in visibility. You know, there's ways to look at return on investment, but knowing that up front, yes, having your own podcast will take time. How much time? I mean, you get out of it what you put into it, right? Like Grace does Storytellers every week. That's huge. And that's taken her podcast to another level. I haven't done that with Growing Up Bookish. I don't have the time right now. I don't even have a middle grade book yet. So I'm only doing it once a month. Now, as I get closer to having an actual middle grade book, am I going to bump that up? Oh, heck yeah. But I've got the groundwork laid and I'll know what I'm doing. And when I'm ready, I can take it up a notch and make it something more. So, you know, some of that's just around boundaries. Like, hey, maybe I just want to play with this for a little while, see if I like it. And then if it's working for you and it's doing what you want for it, then you can max it out.
And the average podcaster only podcasts 5 episodes and then decides it's not for them. I would tell you, if you're thinking of this, please don't stop at 5 episodes, because it really, you know, give yourself 10 episodes, but that's the average, 5 episodes, and then they fold up shop. I would tell you to give yourself at least 10 episodes to see if you're, you know, finding your footing, gaining a larger audience. Again, just like I don't look at my book sales, I don't look at my ratings. I'm on a radio station, not on a traditional podcast platform, and we'll talk about that as well in a minute. But the woman who owns my radio station will tell me, you know, Storytellers is #2 on the network right now. So she watches it, but I don't, because it's not part of building my career in that way. But Mary also talked about something that I think is really critically important. We're writing these 3 books. Because of Bookish Road Trip, because we're authors, because we're podcasters, we were able to reach out to some pretty heavy hitters to be contributors to our book. I think, Mary, if you and I asked a year ago to some of our contributors, because these are all anthologies, hey, would you write the forward to our book? I don't feel that we would have had the cachet. What do you think?
No. And cachet is something you build too. So like, think about, Grace, in 5 years, who we could get.
Let's keep doing this. We do have a question, Mary, about how often do you post a podcast? Weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or some other frequency? Mary's is monthly. Mine is every week through the Storytellers. Launchpad is twice a month.
Twice a month. Yeah. So you pick your own.
At the moment. Did you just say Launchpad is twice a month at the moment?
Did I say at the moment?
I was worried that you said at the moment.
No, I wasn't implying that. I think, you know, you set your boundaries, right? Again, and I will say, you know, if you start reading best practices, obviously the more you put into something, the better you're going to get at it, the quicker you're going to get better at it, the more, you know, the more. But one can only do what one can do.
Mary's good at boundaries, me, not so much. Let's move forward.
Let's do it. All right, let's get started. Grace, you get to start us too.
I thought you did that.
Oh,
But
no.
I can do it.
I can do it. So first thing you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to develop a concept. Think about what your show is going to be. You're gonna want like a name for it that's kind of memorable and interesting, and an angle that's going to be maybe different than what's already out there. You know, the more specific you can be, the better in the long run, to kind of set yourself apart and really create a unique stamp. You're going to choose your format. You're going to think, gosh, is this going to be video? Is this going to be audio? Is this going to be both? I think people are moving more and more toward it being both, that you can do a lot more and get more leverage out of both. I know several people who really only ever post the video, the audio, but they have the video and they say that they're going to do something with it one day, and maybe they will. I don't know. But you can
I'm also going to interrupt there, Mary, though, because many podcasts tape only in audio, but we look at run the video while we're doing it, so you can get all those visual cues as well.
Interesting. I did do one. I've only think I'd done one podcast where I was on Zoom, but there was no video, so it was dark. And And I think that's the only time I've ever done it in Zoom where we had no video, even because we could have. But it felt like a confessional. Like I felt like I was like admitting things I'd never would have admitted if I
Maybe you weren't.
their face. That was on Stories That Empower. I think you were on that podcast too.
I was. That was a great. Sean does an amazing job.
He really, really does. And his show is kind of like that anyway. Like it's very much getting into like the root and heart of things. Anyway, you're going to prepare for your show. We talked a lot about how you would do that as a guest, but you do similar things as a host. You know, you're going to have your lighting, you're going to have your sound, you're going to research your guest and find out about their book, or maybe it's not a book, maybe it's some other platform, but you're going to find out about their thing, the reason they're on your show. You're going to come up with questions you're going to ask them ahead of time. Some podcast hosts send those questions in advance to people, some don't. Pluses and minuses to either, and some of that's just a timing thing. But consider that. You're going to prepare for your show by making sure your guest knows what's going on and communicating all of the things. And so you're going to want to do all that stuff. You're going to record your first episode. Do you do that live? Do you do that in a Zoom thing where you record it and post it later, or StreamYard, or wherever you might choose to do that? I think Grace is going to throw some options at you in a few minutes for that. Then you're going to edit, and then you're going to publish, and then you're going to market. And we'll talk about all those a little bit more one at a time. So when you're developing your concept, I think this is me, yes? Yeah. When you're developing concept, you want to think about what your goal is. Again, we keep saying that to you, but I really think that you risk wasting your time if you aren't really clear on why you're doing this. You think about your theme, what you're wanting to get out of this. So in my case, I want to build a platform so that when I have a children's book ready to go, I have librarians, I have teachers, I have parents, I have grandparents, I have children's bookstore owners, all already part of my little community around my podcasts, and I can leverage that when I have a book come out. I also honestly want a literary agent. Gosh, next month I happen to have a guest who does middle grade books as a literary agent. And, you know, I mean, so just kind of thinking through those sorts of things, like, what do I want to get out of this? And how can I make what I want happen? Think about a name, something memorable, something cute, and think about your branding, your color scheme, a logo, that sort of thing. Handprints. But kind of come up with all those ideas, and that can be really fun. I mean, creative people, that can be a place where you guys can really, you know, come up with some good stuff.
When you're talking about choosing a format, there's a question about, can you use Zoom for your podcast? Absolutely. You can definitely do that. So there are a couple of ways. The classic way for a podcast was just audio. Now it's audio and video. Those are now called vodcasts, new term to me just in the last few months. So there's that combination of the audio and the video. And even when I'm on a radio station, but it's, you know, it's like Sirius radio, it's internet radio. It's not like you can be driving along in your car and find me. But with the different formats, I post to YouTube on my personal channel, the radio stations, which is Authors on the Air, Global Radio Network, and I post to them. But then there are all these other platforms that are free to post to, and they go almost anywhere your podcast could go. So if you go to Anchor or you go to Spotify, you can then pick, there's something called, don't hold me to this, I think it's called an RRS code, but your show has a code and you can say, oh, please also put this on iHeartRadio, please put this on Apple Play, please put this on that. And this is a great time to just talk about a minute. Well, let me finish up with pay to play. Most places are free. They're happy to have you. They don't get paid. You don't get paid, nor do you have to pay. But some places are pay to play. And that was a new phrase to me, but it's where you pay some amount of money to be on that show. And Mary and I have we have our two podcasts that we've talked about, the Growing Up Bookish and the Storytellers. Those are, I would say, traditional. We also have Launchpad, which is pay to play. So guests pay a small amount to come onto our show, but they're also guaranteed a lot of cross promotion. They get Mary's marketing services. So they get something for that. That's something you're going to have to decide about in your marketing budget. And that's something, you know, Mary probably wouldn't tell you that, but she's great at helping authors figure out a marketing budget and what can I really pay and where do I get the biggest bang for my bucks? Not on ring lights, for example, as we already talked about. But this is a great place to talk about. You don't have to do this alone. There are what I call author genies. There's a woman that both Mary and I work with called Carrie Ann Schaefer, and she's a fabulous author in her own right. But I just hired her because, you know, those RRS or RSS codes I just mentioned, I realized that even though Storytellers had been up for over a year, it was only going to like 5 platforms. Now it was still rating really well, but I didn't want to learn. I didn't have the time to learn. I contacted Carrie Ann Schaefer and said, you're the author genie, do this. It cost me $100. She fixed it, and it would have cost me so much time to figure that out. Similarly, I just hired an intern who is fabulous, super smart, very reasonable, and she now does the things I hate to do, which is uploading to all those platforms that I just mentioned. It's not hard, it's just time consuming. So don't feel you have to do these things alone. And Mary and I could certainly help you find people who could do some of these things. So let's go on to what Mary already alluded to, which was the idea of different formats. There's, you know, the guest communication. We're on 21, Mary, please.
Okay.
So there's the guest communication. We've already talked about sound, lighting and sound, and atmosphere. Make sure that you are in that quiet room. Put your dog away, find a babysitter. It doesn't have to be perfect. I will tell you, it's not always perfect. I interviewed an author the other day. We did our sound check. Everything was great. And then she said, you know, it's such a beautiful day. I'm just going to open the door. Never did it occur to me that that would be a problem, in that she had wind chimes outside the door. And for the entire half hour of our interview, you heard tingling wind chimes. And I didn't know. I could have just said, hey, must be a beautiful day in Seattle because I can hear your wind chimes. I was just obsessing with the fact that I should have thought about that. So do think about your atmosphere. Then there's a thing about questions versus scripts. I've had authors say to me, I need a script before I'll come on your show. I never do it for 2 reasons. One is I don't have time to do it. Mary alluded to that. And secondly, I want it to be a conversation. We talked about that early on about, you know, yes, you have that message about, you know, they want to talk about growing up bookish, but Mary's going to say, that's great. It grew out of my novel, Boop and Eve's Road Trip. So questions or scripts, I always have for my storytellers now. I used to have, remember I said it gets easier. I used to have, she's going to say this and I'll say that. Now I have 5 questions that I hope I get to. What's most important is that you're looking at the time that, you know, you're constrained to. The radio station likes it to be 15 minutes. I can never get it shorter than 20. Our other show is 30 minutes. Some shows go for an hour and a half, but that's up for you to decide. And some people are having to leave, but thank you so much for being with us. Mary, take us through.
All right. Is this me?
We're on 22.
We were here, right?
Nope, 22 now. Yep, there you go.
Here.
Back one, go back one. There you go.
This?
22, right there.
I
See
can see numbers. Oh, I see my, oh, you know what? Our faces are covering up numbers.
I'm sorry. So Mary, talk to us about key to success.
Keys to success. Excellent. Okay. So 3 things you want to have. You want to have quality programming. Again, that's where having like a good guest comes into play. So you do want, if people pitch you to be on your show, you do want to check them out. You do want to make sure that they have something to offer, both in terms of what they say and how they say. I have occasionally seen people on podcasts that were just didn't, I don't know if they were nervous. I don't know what it was, but it was just like listening to a bland robot talk. That doesn't help you out. So even if they have a great book, they aren't necessarily a great guest. So research them, try to find video of them, try to find audio of them, that kind of thing. You want to be consistent. So pick when you're going to host your podcast and how often, and do that. Show up when you say you're going to show up. Don't be all crazy and do it whenever, however, lickety split you think you might want to go, because your audience is going to be too confused to follow you. And then audience engagement. Anytime you have the opportunity, as we have several times during this podcast, to ask people to ask questions or to comment on things or to share their own experiences, that kind of engagement is interactive. It helps people want to listen. It helps people feel heard and seen, and it helps you direct your show in a way that the audience will benefit. And to give the people who are listening to you what they want out of listening to you. You can obviously do this easier in a live format. But even if you're posting later and you're in a forum where people can put comments, pay attention to those, see what people are liking, see what they're not liking, see what they're confused about, and learn from those things and make your next show better as a result of the kinds of questions and concerns people are sharing. Read your reviews, see what people like, don't like. Sometimes reviews can be hurtful, but hopefully not. But you can obviously learn from the hurtful ones after you're done feeling hurt.
Love it. So let's move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about the technology behind this. I'm going to make this super brief. I very rarely edit, boost sound. There's lots of ways to do this. There's GarageBand, there's Audacity. Mary and I use StreamYard a lot for our platforms, but there are tons of technologies. Again, either hire somebody to do it, unless you really want to learn to do it, because it's going to take you a lot of time. If you're going to be, wanting to be on your local radio, then you're going to want to invest somebody who can make your sound fabulous. But otherwise, important, but mostly because of COVID, we've all, and I don't mean this to sound bad, I think we've all lowered our standards for sound because we're so used to just Zooming and being virtual. I come out of a sound background with television, and I would not be happy with the sound that I have, but I also haven't invested in making it better. But I don't think it's been a huge detriment either. Mary, next slide, please. Publishing. We've already talked really about this. You can do Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I'm on an internet radio. Mary's talked about YouTube. I write copious show notes, which are just the things that say, okay, Len, you're going to be on my show next week. Here's the link. Here's the time. Don't forget it's Eastern time. Please give me your phone number. And then I give them blurbs and I give them all the hashtags. I don't know that anybody else has to do that. And I'm thinking of shortening it up. But you can do that. Transcripts and sound bites, again, something I don't do, but other people do it really well. They'll edit it and they'll just be able to post it on social media, and they'll have some cute banter between the two guests, and they'll say, listen to the rest of the episode and like it. These are things I don't do. They are things that I can't even tell you I aspire to do more, except for having more platforms.
I do sometimes think about doing the sound bites things in order to run ads. And there are apps that can do that for little to no money. So one day. Yeah.
There is a question, Mary. Do we use survey questions where an audience can answer multiple questions? If so, do you think it increases the level of audience engagement to the point where it sells books? I love that the question from Lisa is to the point that it sells books. It means you're targeted. It means you're focused. Mary and I have two formats. My Storytellers is not a live format. Mary's, you want to talk about how Growing Up Bookish is and Launchpad is. I think Launchpad does sell books for sure, but its focus is to celebrate book launches. So just like someone earlier ordered my book, I think Launchpad definitely sells books. Mary, what about Growing Up Bookish?
Growing Arena Bookish, I only do one episode a month, and they aren't even always authors. Sometimes I have librarians come on, and sometimes I have literary agents come on, and I do generally ask people to recommend a few books. But I wouldn't say that the goal of that podcast is necessarily to sell books. It's more of a trying to help kids learn to love to read. And so sometimes what that is about finding the right book for the right kid. And that's where the book recommendations come in. So, at one point I had a lady on who is a teacher of dyslexic children, and she talked about books that are around dyslexia. If that finds the right reader, it will sell books. I guarantee you that if the right person sees that episode, but it's maybe less of a salesy show than some of them are.
And I also want to say that's a great question because it gets you back to message. Remember way back in the beginning, we said, remember that you have your message. So one of the things that I do all the time is when I'm interviewed, they'll say, do you ever do any guest speaking? I'll say, one of my favorites is to do book clubs. And in my book and on my website, I have a book club kit you can download. There's a playlist, there's recipes, and you can get all of that. And the best way to get that is if you buy my book, but you can get it in other places. So it's having that message that will really help you sell books. Mary, it's 8:21. I want to be respectful of time, so let's go to the next slide.
Marketing. Okay, you want some fantastic cover art. Yes, you can use Canva. Yes, you can hire a graphic designer. All of those things are possible, but you want it to look good and professional. And you want to be consistent with it. You want to have a look that says when people see that graphic, they know it's going to be about your show. Show notes, Grace has already talked about. Running ads. We just talked about that a second ago. If you can get the little sound bites and things like that, those are fantastic to use for ads. But you can also have a still graphic be an ad for your show. I would encourage you to run the ad in the platform that your show is in. I think that's the most bang for your buck. Social media, of course, you should and will share your podcast on social media. Groups and forums are something we haven't really talked about much, but I think they can be a really great avenue for sharing your podcast. So looking for like a Facebook group that centers around some of the same topics that your podcast covers, maybe even partnering with the group and making a relationship with that group. Most groups have promotional rules, when you can promote, how you can promote. If in doubt, you should contact the moderator of those groups and ask for permission or how they want you to do it or what would be a good fit. But they can be a really great tool if you use them with good etiquette. Cross promotion, making friends with other podcasters, having them on your show if you have similar audiences, and getting the authors who are on your show to promote your show and things like that. So kind of really thinking through how to maximize and build relationships where you can help one another. I think Grace and I both believe, together we're stronger, we can lift each other and that sort of thing. And then email marketing, newsletters is really, you don't have to call them newsletters, you can call them whatever you want, but having an email list of people who follow your podcast or like your book or both, and contacting them and letting them know when your shows are. These are your fans. These are the people that want to know, but we're all really busy and we all can't keep track of when everything we like is. So those reminders in our inbox can be really helpful because, usually our inbox is somehow linked to our calendars, and it's a lot easier in that forum to go ahead and throw something on your calendar if, gosh, I'm seeing the date right here in my newsletter and my email account. So there are lots of ways to market your book. I'm going to go ahead and kind of put this out to you. So a podcast as a guest, and then a podcast as a host. Both of those are investments in you, your platform, your career. I do believe that you can sell books through these methods. I do believe that you can build communities. I do believe that you can connect with people and get visibility. They're great tools for all of that. And you can, as Grace likes to say, throw spaghetti at the wall and just start pitching like a crazy person. And that can bring rewards. Absolutely 100%. Don't doubt that. But one of the things that can become overwhelming, as some of your questions have indicated you are aware of, is the time involved in all of that, and the know-how, right? And so what I try to offer my clients, my marketing consultant clients, is help and direction and how to streamline their efforts so they aren't just doing this here and this here and this here and this here, but leveraging each of those efforts to maximize them and get the best results, so that you're working smarter, not harder, for better results. And I think that's really the key to having a strategy and not just running around like a chicken with your head cut off. I know I have a tendency to go, ooh, squirrel, that looks fun. That's looking neat. I want to try that. And then suddenly I find myself going crazy because I'm trying a million things and I don't know what's working because I don't have time to do any of it right. And so what I would suggest to you is doing less better. And I will be frank, this is something I struggle with too, and I know Grace struggles with, and I think we all will, but I think sometimes having that third party come in and help rein you in can be really helpful, right? Like to have that sounding board to say, why are you doing that again? Well, are you sure that's the best use of your time? Can be a really helpful relationship to have. So if any of you are in that situation at some point in this author journey where you feel like you need another voice, a sounding board, some ideas, some direction, please feel free to give me a call. I do free discovery calls where I just chat with you for a little while and we figure out whether we can work together or can't work together, or, how we
And Mary,
might.
that I'm going to interrupt you because Barbara Franzen just said, I'm so excited and I'm overwhelmed. Can I hire one of you? So I just wrote back, give us a call. But I think really, Barbara, the way to start that is to have a conversation with Mary. She does, what do you call them, Mary? You just mentioned it.
Discovery calls.
Discovery calls. So Mary, being very respectful of people's times. Let's go to the next side. Barbara, definitely do that. So what is success for you? It goes back to goal. I would tell you, it's just got to be intrinsic. I feel super successful. I'm not making tons of money, but I'm having a great time. And, part of that is the gift of being my age, but define success for you. It'll help you be strategic. Mary, next slide, please. Questions and answers. We have a little bit of time for some more, but I'm trying to get to them as they go. Please feel to continue to put questions in the chat, but let's, Mary, move to the next slide for people who are going to have to leave, and we can still keep what's in the slide. So everybody who participated today and put in an email, we'll send you that article. We also have, through something else Mary and I didn't know we were going to create, called Author Talk Network, which is a panel discussion series. We came out with an ebook. Again, we didn't anticipate it, but it's called Sharp Tips for Effective Writing. We're happy to send that to anybody who puts their email in the chat, and I'm assuming that Len and Liz will send us those emails. We've also really tried to model for you today some of the things that we've been saying. Join a Facebook group. We're going to recommend which group, Mary?
Bookish Road Trip.
Fabulous group, lots of fun. Consider being a guest on Launchpad. You can find us about us at launchpadradio.com. If you've got a book out, again, just transparent, that's a paid to play platform, not very expensive. Mary has a newsletter. She mentioned a newsletter. So it's nuts and bolts, maryhelensheriff.com. And then to totally model what we'd say, if you have a blog, a book club, a podcast, another platform, if Lynn and Liz, people who do things as great as your group is, tell people to invite us on. We'd be happy to share. Mary, closing words? Well, let's see. Fabulous. Yes, add me into, yes, Len, you'll get Sharp Tips for Effective Writing. I want all of these items too. Barbara, great, we'll send that to you. Are there any other questions before we close? 8:29, Mary. Woo. Any other questions? Mary, close us out.
Thank you all so much for coming and listening to us tonight. I hope that we gave you some good food for thought, that you are thinking about what podcast might be a good fit for you and whether or not you want to host your own. And the answer, honestly, might not be yes. And that's okay too, right? We can all lean into different things Podcasts are a good venue, but they're not the only way. So I'm glad that you all are thinking about this and will continue to think about it. And I wish you all the best of luck on your podcasting journey, whatever that looks like.
Mary, that's fabulous. Give me your email, please. People have asked how they can actually find us. So you're at
Mary Helen Sheriff at gmail.com.
SHERIFF@gmail.com. So that's a lot of people are saying thank you. And I would say Mary and I both would tell you thank you. And we're real sincere about that. This is such an incredible community. Thanks so much for being with us. Find us on our websites. Find us over at Bookish Road Trip. We live there.
And thanks to Len and Liz for
Thanks.
hosting these.
Yeah.
Fantastic group. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. I took copious notes, and there is a lot to learn, and it is kind of overwhelming, but at the same time, it's exciting, and it's a whole, and you're offering help, which is even better. So thank you so much. You were really good. I felt very like we were in very good hands, and it's exciting. So thank you. Everybody, we're right on time, so I want to say a couple of things. One, we will have our next, where did I put it? We're having, we will, on December 3rd at 11 a.m., we will be having our next webinar. Here it is. I finally found it, which is Turning Life Experience into Poetry with Ellen Burkett Morris. That's a Saturday, which is very different, 11 a.m. Central. So we'll be sending out information on that in the next couple of days with registration link and that kind of thing. Hope you'll enjoy it. You will come and enjoy it. Ellen is wonderful. She teaches for us, and I happen to know she'll bring great expertise to this and make poetry very, very accessible for all of us who would like to be poets but don't quite know how. The other thing I would like to say is we're always very happy that Story Circle Network is in your life, and we hope you will continue to participate in these webinars, our classes, and hope you will sign up to be a member if you're not already. And you all have the benefit of, because you're participated in a webinar, Mary Helen, you guys get a free membership. So we certainly hope that you will be part of our community as well, which is an amazing group of women writers who are extremely supportive and write absolutely in concert with everything that you're discussing. So we are all on the same page, and I'm delighted. So you'll be getting information on that soon.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Oh, the other thing, it'll take a couple of days, maybe 3 before you get your recording, but you will get a recording. You can be sure. And that way you can go back over everything and review it, which I certainly will be. So thank you again, Elizabeth. We're happy that you're here. Next time we see you, hopefully you will be a mother. That would be exciting as well. All right, everybody. Good night. And I'm going to stop our recording as of right now. Okay. Thank you so much, Grace and Mary Helen.
Thank you.